Hey everyone, this is Matt with the Patriot Party, and today we have a very, very special show. We are doing a live interview with Tom Sauer. You guys and gals can expect a very interesting interview with a true American patriot, a veteran helping veterans, a righteous and noble cause. Y'all can find all of Tom's social media and website links at the bottom of the page. Please check them out and support this cause. Now let's give a very warm welcome to Tom Sauer. Tom, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Appreciate being here. I bet you say that to all the boys about how
Uh,
great.
well, I don't know. Okay, well, first, before we get started, Tom, let me say that you and all your veteran brothers in arms are the true American heroes and an example of what the Patriot Party stands for. Thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. It's all right. They paid me.
Well, but I mean, they probably didn't pay you enough. It's like teachers;
I
they
feel
don't pay
like
them
they
enough.
overpaid me. I'll tell you what. Honestly, I'll tell you something. I did have. I mean, look, experiences may vary. Obviously, I had the
Yeah.
time of my life. I really did. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, the thing is, part of what we do now. There are a lot of folks who had a rougher go of things and a rougher go of things since they've gotten out. So, but I was incredibly blessed, very fortunate. Had a couple close calls, nothing too crazy, and I got out with all my fingers and toes for the most
Oh,
part.
that's
And
great.
so, but also at the same time, I've got a lot of friends who didn't, and also a lot of friends who, might have come out, unscathed, at least physically or for the most part, but obviously are dealing with a lot of issues, back when they're in the real world. You know what I mean?
Well, I
So,
come from a military family. I wasn't in the military myself. I went into entrepreneurship, but my grandfather, he was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and he actually, when he fought over in Vietnam, he got Agent Orange,
ooh,
and didn't, I mean, he actually lived a long time with Agent Orange, but that's what ended up taking him out. So, you
yeah.
know, it was a bad time for some, and then the military, I don't think now, or at least years ago, wasn't what it was when you were in. I'm sure.
Yeah, it is different. And one thing I got to say, it's because, I would say that compared to the Vietnam era,
Hmm.
compared to we treat our veterans a hell of a lot better. But also
Yes.
that's a low bar, to be honest. And
Yes.
so it is, and there's still a lot of issues out there. And also one of the things that I kind of came to kind of that really I internalized is that look, veterans are people. They're just people. They're not just people, but they're people like everyone else. They've got a lot of the same problems. And here's something that's interesting, and maybe I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but one of the things that's really interesting I've learned after being involved with the veteran, mental health addiction treatment space is that it's almost always a result of trauma, right? But what's really interesting is a very large, actually, I'd say the vast majority of the veterans that we treat who have a lot of issues, they don't have combat trauma, or if they're worse, many of them didn't see any combat or any heavy combat. Many did. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
many didn't. And the thing is, though, is that what they're dealing with is they're dealing with childhood trauma, and it's childhood trauma. It's very common, and I mean, not all the time, but more times than you think. And it's usually because they had a very rough upbringing, and part of the reason why they joined the military at a young age was to get the hell out of Dodge. I mean, it really
Hmm.
was where they're in a bad situation, bad home life, whatever's going on in their town, nothing good, no opportunities, nothing but trouble. And they join the military to get out of that and for opportunities, which is a good move. I mean, obviously, it's almost always a good decision. But
Yes.
whenever all those trauma and issues they dealt with, they never had a chance. And this happened to me. I had some issues. Divorce. My father died of a drug overdose right before I finished high school and before I left for the military.
Okay.
But the thing is, then my ass got kicked into adulthood. I didn't have time to deal,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really until for a lot of these guys, because they're so busy, constantly doing stuff, they don't have time to like think about it, process it, and then when they get into the real world, all of a sudden these things kind of come down on like a ton of bricks on top of just all the issues with transitioning and finding a place of belonging within the real world, so to speak. To make sense?
So it's a compounding problem, is what
Oh
it
yeah,
is.
100%. And like, even just navigating things like the VA, just for your disability benefits, let's say, I consider myself to be a fairly high agency person. I later, after the Marine Corps, I went into a commissioning program. I went to the Naval Academy, and then I later became an officer. And afterwards, while I was an officer, they sent me to graduate school. I went to UCLA, nice highfalutin kind of a place.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
where I had a lot of imposter syndrome, I'll be honest with you. I didn't feel like I really fit in there. And but the thing is, then even despite all that, I can read and write above a 10th grade level, right? And I
Smarter than a fifth grader in that show.
right. And the thing is, I still had a hell of a time just trying to figure out how that whole process works. And there's tons and tons of programs, opportunities out there. But the problem is like they're really bad at communicating it and making these available to people. And I feel like you have to have a graduate degree in public policy just to understand how the system works.
Have to navigate it.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah, it's a real thing.
So I'm going to go off the cuff a little bit because this interview is kind of taking a life of its own already, which
Sure.
is fine. It's great. I love it when it does this. I reported on something. I've always been a very big advocate for veterans, with my family and everything. Always been. Respect you guys totally. I've been trying to do reporting for a while, and we've had a show. We started out with YouTube and live streams and everything. And I remember something last year that caught my attention that I called out pretty hard when it happened, and I'm going to get your thoughts on it. So I know, and we do an unbiased reporting. When Trump does bad, we give him
Sure.
the what for. On this side, though, I will call it when Biden was president. I remember the numbers got released, and $3 billion had gone to homeless veterans, which are obviously struggling with addiction and psychological disorders, because that's what a
Yes.
lot of times makes them homeless. And then they turned it over and showed how 66 billion had gone to illegal immigrants and giving them benefits. 22 times? 22 times the amount of money going for people crossing our border illegally than going towards legal veterans who served our country. How do you feel about that?
Criminal. No, I mean
Criminal, right?
really. I mean it is. I don't have a better description. I think it was absolutely criminal. And then there are especially when using resources like the VA and when it's hard enough for veterans to get their care, even routine care, let alone the most some of the most urgent needs out there. So for example, my company, we are what's called a community care provider. We're a part of the
Okay.
community care network, which means that we are contracted with the VA through a third party administrator. And what we do is very similar to like folks from the military when they have TRICARE, you're allowed to go see a doctor out in town who's
Okay.
contracted with DOD, usually for families. Same way, but for the VA. And the thing is that when you think of VA healthcare, right, you don't really think about their dermatology program, their radiology program. There's some things they're really good at. For example, prosthetics, excellent, right?
Yes.
Obviously, that's one thing they're quite good at because there's a need. But
Oh,
what you really
absolutely.
think about is their addiction, mental health, PTSD, suicide prevention, because those are the biggest threats to veterans these days.
Absolutely.
100%, bar none. And the thing is, though, is that when the VA is overwhelmed by care, and then President Trump during his first term created he signed into law the Mission Act, which that was meant to do is to open up healthcare, all sorts of healthcare for veterans. Now, here's the problem: is that even under the Trump administration, the VA is being run by mostly, and I'm not talking about the political appointees, I'm talking
Oh,
about the career
mm-hmm.
appointees,
And
is
that's the
being run
problem.
by an organization that is against the agenda of the president, right? And so,
Okay.
and we'll look at it this way: is if you think of the Department of Veterans Affairs, which, by the way, is the second largest agency in the federal government. People don't know
Wow.
this.
No,
The
I didn't
only,
know
yeah, the only organization bigger than the VA is the DoD. The military is the only
that.
organization, really.
Wow.
A $240 billion, no, I think healthcare alone is like $240 billion annual budget.
Quarter
Um,
trillion.
how about, yeah, here's a question for it. How many employees do you think there are in the VA? Take a guess.
Somewhere between a quarter and a half million.
480,000, right? The
Yeah.
VA has more employees than the United States Army has soldiers, right?
Wow. And
Yeah.
that's a crazy statistic.
And so now the thing is, what happens here is then you have an organization where, if think of the VA, particularly the healthcare system, as a struggling public school system, right? And community care providers like my organizations and hundreds of others like us are the charter schools, right? Now, what
Yeah.
does that public school system think of the charter schools? A threat, right? And
Yeah.
what does the teachers union think of those charter schools? I.e.,
Uh,
the analogy here is the VA employees union. They're always harping about, oh well, the Republicans and President Trump, all they want to do is privatize the VA. Not at all, right? What they want to do is be able to give access to care, especially the most critical care, which, when I look at someone who is in a mental health crisis or an addiction crisis, and they finally decide to raise their hand and say, hey, I need help, all right? Especially if they're going through addiction, when they're withdrawals, that's a brief window of time, right?
yes.
And so then what really needs to happen is you got to grab them by the collar and say, okay, you're going to care, get in the car, get on the plane, here we go, right now. Instead, the VA puts them on waiting lists. They'll say, oh, okay, well, we can get you an assessment in about sometime maybe in the next week or two. And then from
Oh
there,
man.
you go on a waiting list, right?
Yeah.
And they do that when community care is already available. So when the Mission Act passed, it was supposed to give immediate care based on drive time and distance. Well, what happens though is if you go back to if any of us paid attention in high school civics class, or maybe watch Schoolhouse Rock, the whole idea is that, okay, a bill gets signed into law, it's passed by the Congress, signed into law by the president. Then what happens, what they don't really tell you about, then that law goes to the relevant agencies, in this case the
Hmm.
VA, and then their lawyers, guess whose side they're on for the most part,
Yeah.
they look at and they interpret the law, right?
Yep.
And then they
Yep.
create a policy based on their interpretation of the law. A lot of
Yep.
creative license happens. So because of that, the VA created a policy where these access standards, the standards for access for what the VA refers to as RRTP, which is Residential Rehabilitation Treatment Program, which is essentially mental health treatment, addiction treatment. That's the term the VA uses, RRTP. So what they do is they say, well, the access standards are actually different. Now, I don't see anywhere in the Mission Act, in the law, because I've actually kind of done my homework on this sort of thing. It's actually
Hmm.
not written in there, but for whatever reason, during the first Trump administration and especially into the Biden administration, chose to interpret that much differently. Because at the end of the day, and look, the VA's number one priority, and I'll get in trouble for saying this, but the VA's number one priority is the VA, right? The
Well.
same way that a
Mhm.
teacher's union's number one priority is not the students, it's the teachers. Now, what that creates, though, obviously, is a negative incentive. And also, by the way, I got to really emphasize something. I'm not talking about the treatment providers, the boots on the ground, frontline folks. I'm
I
not
know who
talking
you're
about
talking
the
about.
nurses or the therapists. I'm talking about the middle management, usually, and upper middle management. So, what VA central office, like the VA headquarters in DC, thinks should be happening does not translate to what's happening in the field, as they say. That makes
Well,
sense?
no, it makes perfect sense to me. And actually, on your breakdown, I think we missed a step where things get further distorted because you said the lawyers they create the basically the policy statements, and
Yes.
then you've got the people you talked about, the career employees, middle and upper management, and they arbitrarily basically read it and come up with their own versions, and each one can differ, and
Yeah.
then they interpret what the lawyers wrote. So you got
Yeah.
two interpretations in between the actual law itself.
Correct.
And that's where, um if I'm not mistaken, we can draw a parallel to what Biden was doing when everybody got mad and said that he is circumventing Congress by actually changing policies within the different federal, basically entities like the
Yeah.
DEA or whatever. He went in and changed Title IX, to let,
Yeah.
he did all that stuff. And instead of going through Congress, he was circumventing Congress to basically make it off an interpretation within the agencies.
Correct. And the thing is, and here's another thing though, as well, is look, everyone in DC loves to say, well, caring for our veterans is a nonpartisan, non-political issue.
Yeah.
The hell it isn't. Okay, it is an extremely partisan political issue because again, it's is the VA as a large enterprise exists really for itself. Think of it as a government-funded, unprofitable, very bloated HMO, right? Where they don't like going outside their own lifelines, right? They
Hmm.
don't like doing that. They like to keep it in house, and even at the expense of the veterans that they're entrusted to keep. Here's another idea to give you this is that, okay, so let's say you're not a veteran, you're not in the VA healthcare, so you're a normal, civilian, right? Who
Hmm.
is off the street, and you have a bare bones insurance policy, something that meets the Obamacare requirements, where you say I have health insurance, right?
A lot of
Bare
people do.
bones. No, no,
Hmm.
we're not talking about some fancy healthcare plan or platinum or anything like that. But
Yeah.
you've got a bare bones one, and you have an addiction problem or a mental health problem, you're in a mental health crisis, and you need help. You don't even need to make a phone call. You can, many people do. They might call their insurance company and say, "Hi, I need
Hmm.
help." And they'll say, "Oh, okay, well, in your area, we're in network with these, pick one," right?
Yeah.
And you can go. Or now, but you don't even have to do that. Technically, you could literally, somebody could just knock on the door, could walk into a treatment center, knock on a door and saying, "Hi, I need help. Please help me." They'll say, "Okay, where is your insurance?" You show them your insurance card. Okay, they check, they look it up, like, yes, you are covered, which everyone's covered, has to be. Come on in. That day, you'll get seen that day. Veterans within the VA healthcare system, for their most urgent, the biggest need for veterans, right, when it comes to their healthcare, do not have anywhere close to that level of access. So because of that, obviously, when I noticed these problems, my last duty station was Washington, D.C., right? I live in Southern California now. My last
Hmm.
duty station was D.C. I lived in Capitol Hill. I knew a lot of people who were staffers. I knew some folks in the media just through personal friendships and relationships while I was living there. And this became a problem. So I reached out to people in DC. And 2 years ago, I testified before House Veterans Affairs Committee on
Oh
this
wow.
exact problem. Yeah, and I might be testifying before the Senate here in the next few months. I'm not sure yet.
Wow. Well,
And
we might have to do another show if you do.
yeah, and also right now is about this exact problem, and I'm trying to lay this out, and usually get a lot of nods, but not a whole lot of action, and that's, frankly, and I'll be honest with you, that's coming from both sides.
Oh,
So,
don't you don't have to tell me. I found out. Basically, well, the Republican Party lost me last year. Mike Johnson is actually my representative in Louisiana.
oh, you're in Louisiana,
And
okay?
and when he voted, yeah, I didn't see you as a Cali guy. Um, but anyway, when he voted to keep, as being a constitutional lawyer, when he said I'm going to vote, to make the amendments on the FISA Act, which was never meant for Americans, to spy on them. I'm going to amend it where they can't break the Constitution. They got to honor the Fourth Amendment, and they got to get a warrant to, instead of these warrantless spying on patriots and Americans. And then he went back with the alphabet agencies and came back out, and as a tiebreaker voted down making the amendments, and gave some lame excuse of, well, y'all don't know the bigger issue. There is no bigger issue than following the Constitution. There is nothing bigger than following the Constitution. So
That does
you
sound
can,
nice, doesn't it? That does sound
yeah.
nice, doesn't it? Yeah, I know. I'm up with you 100%. And I'll even say this much is, so actually, so now that the home team occupies both houses of Congress and the White House,
Uh-huh.
I've been in contact with the relevant people at the White House,
Oh
right?
wow.
And so, yeah, I got to call with them again tomorrow. With it's called the Domestic Policy Council, right? So
Cool.
just to kind of give a little bit of a more of a civics lesson, within the office of the White House, you've got all these different offices, right? So like that's why you've got like National Security Council, right, which is folks from like DOD, State Department, Treasury, blah blah blah, right, DOJ, all those. And then you've got Economic Policy Council, economic stuff, and then you've got the Domestic Policy Council, which handles all domestic policy that doesn't have to do with like economics, taxes, etc. So the relevant folks who work at DPC, as it's called, who work. I mean, I don't want to highlight them, but I know them. I'm on a first name basis with these guys. I've made them aware of it. Here's the issue: is that the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, nice guy, great guy. I'm concerned that he is being told things that are not actually true. And the thing is again, he is in charge of a gigantic organization that is aligned against his policies. They're going to say, yes, sir, three bags full, but that doesn't always translate to what happens in the field. There's a great, you might have ever heard of Conquest's Law, which is like a political scientist back in the day. And one thing he says, if you're ever trying to understand the dysfunction within a large organization, you run under the assumption that it is being run by a cabal of its enemies,
That
right?
sounds like some Sun Tzu stuff.
Yeah, I know, but it is right? And so,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah. And then
It,
for the other one that goes with it too is any large organization that is not explicitly right wing eventually becomes left wing.
I mean, I,
Yeah,
you know,
right. Think about it.
I mean, I I have used this since, and I know that you are, I can tell by talking to you that you're very aligned with the Republican Party, and I'm aligned. I'm a common sense conservative,
Sure.
but I saw one of the, actually, it was when all this Epstein stuff came up, and they had a
Oof.
vulture, and it said Republican, Democrat, just different wings of the same vulture, and it goes along with what you're saying that both sides, you know but it brings me into a question. It brings me into a question that
Sure.
I want to kind of go back to this disconnect between the law and what people are actually doing. So really, if they didn't want to disconnect, because they got to know there's a disconnect and all this stuff, they spend so much time on these bills. They could actually, within Congress, write up the, for the final approval, write up the policy that veterans are supposed to follow and that everybody else is supposed to follow. So my question to you is, do you think, since they probably already know about this, they have to know, they're the government,
Yeah.
and people have already, the NSA, they're catching phone calls, whatever, however they know. And do you think the root of it is just control? They do it on purpose to
Like,
allow this dysfunction so they can have more control because there is control and chaos. That's the reason that the racial bias, all this stuff, these buzzwords are used to keep everybody split. Critical race theory, all that stuff.
sure. What's funny is, and obviously we're talking about broader, not just out of what we're the veterans of, but I say
Yeah,
broader. I feel that there is less malice and more groupthink and incompetence along the way. It's like when trying to figure out intention, it's always better to assume ignorance or incompetence than it is to assume malice. So I don't necessarily think I'm saying this is like I spent a lot of time in large organizations. I was in the military most of my adult life. I got a lot of friends in DC, and it just does seem like this is kind of hard. Or also, believe it or not, like as crazy as this sounds, is like we're talking about the Epstein stuff. It's entirely possible that whatever evidence there actually was of control ever is not around anymore, and
well,
they just
I mean, you
doesn't
say that, but then
exist.
there's a black book. There's a
Yep.
woman doing 20 years in prison, and they
Yep.
used those as federal exhibits, and
Yep.
said we're gonna put them under seal
Yeah.
because of the sensitive information. But
Right.
these are huge pieces of evidence. There were supposed to be almost 1971 names, addresses, email addresses.
Yep.
I mean, that could be part of the Epstein file
And
or books right
a
there.
lot of that is some of it's under seal, but a lot of it isn't. But here's the thing: is like again, like I definitely when I heard that like, hey, there's really kind of nothing, there's nothing there or
Yeah,
whatever. When they said that, I was put off by that because I'm honestly like one of those folks who I'm not really the big conspiracy theorist. Although there's some conspiracies I think are very true, but
there are.
but for example, like I think a lot of that evidence is going to be or already has been squashed or completely destroyed, and especially if there was, let's say, a foreign government involved, that
Probably.
probably went. Well, for example, like when they
But they
talked,
say
forget,
Mossad was part of it.
I
Yeah.
didn't. That's you said it, not me, bro. And
Yeah.
so, all right, and so the thing is, though, is like I look at this as, for example, here's a great example when they said we're going to release all the files on JFK
Well, I'm
assassination,
glad you got there. Yeah.
RFK, MLK. Well, the thing is, though, is like if you really think that, like, if let's just say the CIA and the FBI
Mhm.
were involved in the Kennedy assassination, I really don't think that there would be any documentation sitting in a file cabinet in a vault somewhere. You know what I mean? Like that. That's kind of. I don't
O-
think it's sitting and waiting.
Okay, but my rebuttal to that
Yeah.
is, if that be the case, then why did the CIA fight so hard to redact? And then they use this little BS reason that if you
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
any kind of math skills, they said, "Oh, we have to protect the identity of the agents." Man, those
Well, you're all
agents are
dead.
dead.
Yeah. Yeah. There was some. No, fair enough, man. Is there's a lot of discussion where like, hey, there's some sources and methods, and I'm like, everyone's dead, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and honestly, like, I think the weighing and at the very least, like, if there really is nothing there, it is in the public interest to lay it out there. Like, look, this is everything, and for
Ex-
better or for
ex-
worse, here it is. And
exactly.
so, and also, you might remember when Pam Bondi had those files, the binders. right? And they said Epstein Volume 1 or whatever. Okay, this sounds weird. Two of my close personal friends were in the room and got the binders, right? I'll tell you who they are after we get off the air. And
Yeah.
so, but like personal friends of mine.
Yes.
And they were in that, and immediately, like, we got this whole thing. And that's not, by the way, that's not even why they went to the White House. They went there for a separate meet and greet of, they
Yeah.
wanted social media influencers there. And then unexpectedly, in walks in the attorney general and like, hey, we got this for her. And they're like, oh, wow, okay. And then like big photo op. And then, right afterwards, my buddy, like, it goes through it. He's like, there's nothing new here at all. And matter of fact, there's stuff publicly available that is not redacted, and this stuff here is. And I feel that was a lot of just one. I think there probably was some incompetence or ignorance, maybe, that didn't know the whole fact, thought they were doing the right thing, and they just didn't know because it's not a high priority on their radar. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not in the room. I got friends that were in the room. There's something there. There obviously is probably something going on. It was most likely some sort of just an access issue. That the whole purpose of the Epstein stuff was just, hey, they want to have access control, maybe some blackmail that was involved. Because the big thing that got me is, to me, the biggest one that is the biggest red flag is that Jeff Epstein was at best, from what nobody talks about doing business with him. He had Les Wexner as his big client, who just gave him his house. And that I walked past his house in the Upper East Side. It's nice. I mean, I haven't been in it. It looked really nice. It was like the largest single family residence in New York at a time. And he had all these, but anyways, he was living a life. He was probably at best a low 9-figure guy in the hundreds of millions of dollars net worth.
I think it was 900 million or 800 million.
Okay, but he was living a lifestyle of somebody who is a 10 or 11 figure guy. And people don't realize, like, the orders of magnitude. Think, oh, if you're a centimillionaire, you've got everything. Well, guess what? There's a huge jump, 100 times more than, literally 100 times more than somebody who's got 10 billion, hundreds of billion, or, tens of billions of dollars. It's way more. So there was something going on there. And I think that unexplained wealth is one of the biggest red flags. And yeah, something was going on. I don't know. I don't pretend to know, but it also, I think it just speaks to a lot of how that town, DC, moves very slow. There's a lot of groupthink. It's a lot better now, I'd say, on issues that we have an impact, like what we're seeing in Washington, DC today. Like, I used to live in the Navy Yard, right, which is now where they have the juvenile exclusion zone. That's my old neighborhood. And matter of fact, there was like a shooting there back on Friday. That was my old building. Like, I lived at Onyx on First, right on First Street. And it's like I saw some shooting here, cops, and they put yellow police tape everywhere in front of my building. And I'm like, and I'll tell you what, man, I lived there from 2016 to 2019. It was a lovely neighborhood back then. It was safe. It was clean. And then I'm back in DC all the time for work. I remember I walked past that building. The place reeked of weed. There were a lot of youths hanging around, and I didn't feel particularly safe there. Now you hear about all the great carjacking, stabbings, muggings. Like, that never happened when I was there 2016 to 2019. And I think, like, for example, them taking very serious action on that, I don't know if it's necessarily meant to be a distraction from, like, what's going on in Israel and Gaza, whatever. But frankly, I care 100 times more about what's happening in Washington, D.C. than I do what's happening in the Middle East. I'll be honest with you. And I know that people might see this and think that I'm some paid stooge for the Mossad or something.
No. I mean, it depends on how far in the Middle East. If you're talking about Gaza, I could care less. It's they attacked them, they drew first blood. Look at how we responded with George Bush. If you're not with us, you're against us. And it was 10 times worse when you do per capita. So I don't care what they do. Now, if you're talking Iran nuclear program and something to pull the U.S. in, yes, I would care about that. But I've got a question. I think the problem with everything was that it was really suspect, because first, you've got this independent, world famous forensic pathologist who does another autopsy on Epstein and says, oh, it looks like, strangulation or wire or whatever because of the broke bone. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
And he called it, but the original coroner or whatever that did the autopsy didn't catch it. He's like, oh yeah, you're right. And then all we hear before Cash Patel and Dan Bongino get appointed is there's something up, there's something up. This was not a suicide, da 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 da. And both doing podcast interviews in their own podcast. And
Yeah.
then when they get there, they say, "Oh, well, it's nothing." And everybody's like, "Well, what about this?" And well, we looked at everything and it's nothing. Just trust us. And then Dan Bongino gets so mad when everything goes down, he actually leaves and takes a day off. They said he stormed out at the
Yeah.
handling. I think it's just the handling, and it's like, we know that you're covering something when you
Yeah.
went in and said this is going to be transparent, and on my end, when I break, I do a Saturday morning show, and I cover everything for the week: political news, world news, financial, tech news. Then we do sports, celebrity news and gossip, movies, and TV shows, and the networks, and when they're coming out and all that stuff. So it's like a entertainment news across the board. So you can get caught up with the week with one hour, 1 hour and 15 minute show.
Yeah.
That's what it was designed for. That's what originally I designed it for, and then I decided, well, I really wanted to do a podcast to help people, and that's
Yeah.
when I started doing a lot of interviews and stuff. And I've actually been able to help. Like one of my first interview was a whistleblower. This was way back.
Oh, wow.
He was actually a patriot and a veteran and a firefighter and a fire chief, and he had witnessed election fraud, bank fraud, and election interference. Had all the proof. Has hundreds of examples on video, audio, and tried to get, because it actually affected his fire department. Tried
Ooh.
to get the DA and the sheriff. He has all this evidence. I mean, it's case closed.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have a law background, and this is case closed, easy, open,
Yeah.
shut. And they buried it and actually put him on the media and blamed him, twisted and persecuted him. And he's got a 13-page resume where when he came out of the military as a firefighter, he actually worked for the DOD as a civilian government employee to train the federal firefighters. He's got 2 fire degrees from uppity colleges.
Yeah. Yeah.
13 pages of certifications and awards, and he couldn't get a job. And he's a single father of 2
Oh,
teenage daughters. Couldn't get a job for a year. So I've helped him get some traction, helped him with his legal stuff, because he sold his
yeah.
house and spent all the money on a bozo lawyer. And so
Wow.
I'm helping him with his legal stuff, no charge, just helping
Yeah.
him. And we've had some traction with that. And then I helped him, and we actually got Cash Patel's attention
Oh,
because of
good.
all this Epstein stuff. Oh, absolutely. And they referred it to the Denver field agent office, the FBI field
Yeah.
office. And so he got a letter back, from DC,
Wow.
where I had sent out. At my time and cost, I sent out, I think, 13 certified letters. And so he's getting some traction. I said that's where it'll be. Your cases will be won, and you'll get some solace. Is these MFers that did this to you are in federal prison.
That's good. And the thing is, I'll tell you what, like one thing I've definitely learned, if for whatever reason the government decides they don't like you, they'll find a reason to either not hire you, fire you, or not do business with you.
Or
Not because
indict you.
yeah, or indict you. Yeah. And thing is like, I even a lot of times feel like I'm taking a risk by coming on to shows like yours. And I'm a little worried about there being some sort of like retribution all of a sudden that the VAs we work with might decide to they might catch wind. Like, who's this guy? Oh, he owns MacArthur and Miramar. Oh, we're not gonna, like but at the same time, that's part of the reason why I stay very close to folks who are on our
Yes.
team in the government, so that if any funny business does happen, we're gonna put the kibosh on that. But also at the same time, a lot of my criticisms, just going back to VA briefly,
Yes.
is like my criticism of the VA is not meant I'm not one of these guys like burn it down, it's terrible. There's some people that think that and they make a case. I'm not one of those. Like I'm pretty much like I'm not afraid of there being large government entities as long as they're efficient and effective. But the thing is, though, the VA is not efficient, not effective. And I'm not talking about the therapists, nurses, social workers, the boots on the ground folks. Some of those folks, very rare exceptions, we've had an issue with any of them. But I gotta say, like the vast majority of those folks deserve their own parades and medals for the amount of life saving that they do. But to kind of tie it all in, I always feel that it's a couple of different things. It's either groupthink, incompetence, people are worried to step out of the box, worried about risking their jobs. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I think that if there are any really ugly secrets that are being kept, and there are, of course, there are. I'm not any specific case, but just in general, right? There's some really
Oh,
ugly things that
absolutely.
we don't want the public to know about, stuff that you and I probably have no clue about that is happening. But I think there are very few people who actually have that information, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to tie back into like the issues at the DOJ and and the AG and Cash Patel, who I've met several times, love the guy, is I feel that I think they're getting the wool pulled over their eyes. And just because you get your team in power, guess what? There's a whole other infrastructure out there. And that's why I think there actually needs to be far more politicals, when I say political appointees, in key positions, because there's a lot of civil servants who are the non-political employees who are
Yes.
nonpartisan that
Yes.
are actively working against your agenda just because they don't like you and you're from the other team, right? There's a reason why so many federal employees all vote one way, because they're voting for their own jobs and their own budgets. Because the last thing, especially the Trump administration, they're starting to show right now is they want efficiency, accountability, and results. And all that those are things that the federal government just despises. You know?
Oh, well, it's not. It needs to be run that way. My thing. Well, I don't know if we need more politicians or if those jobs that you're talking about that
Yeah.
go through 6, 7 administrations
Yeah.
and they really pull the strings
Oh,
behind the scenes and they control what you get and what you see. So it's like the media and echo chambers. They can manipulate you,
mm-hmm.
just on a larger scale than
Oh
than
yeah.
than what the public has. I mean, they're literally manipulating information. I mean, so is the media. But anyway,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if we need more politicians, or it almost needs to be like the Supreme Court, where where we say it's not a lifetime position anymore. You have to rotate to do
Sure.
something else, or be a field agent, or whatever in a field office. You can't be in D.C. but more than 8 years or
Right.
10 years or whatever.
Yeah. When I say I don't mean politician like a congressman. I mean like somebody that the elected team, right? In this case, the Trump administration. I'm saying people like that they choose,
That
right?
they
Like, hey,
choose,
your people.
yes.
Yeah.
Other than the
So these are still
deputy and the yes.
yeah, these are like other than the deputy and a few key folks, right? For example, I got a buddy of mine who's actually still waiting on his Senate confirmation for a very senior position within the VA, and it's just getting dragged and slow rolled. But I do think there needs to be more political. But when I say political appointees, it doesn't necessarily mean a politician. But you're taking people who have loyalty to the elected government, being President Trump, and also are very ideologically aligned, and there are plenty of folks out there. So that's kind of what I'm referring to. And like, I know a lot of folks in the admin who are that way. Matter of fact, one thing I've noticed that a big lesson learned, because look, during the first Trump administration, I mean, I talked to folks who are in the admin who were there. They're like, they were the dog that caught the car, as in, they're like, oh shit, whoa,
Yeah.
we won, and things they are fighting so hard just to get elected. They were not yet ready. They didn't have a bench of people to draw on to govern, and that's why so many things they had so much resistance. They got led by the nose. This time, they've spent 4 years getting ready for this, right? Preparing for. That's why you saw all these EOs come out like on day one, and also now is there's still some growing pains, but we've learned a few things, and we've got a much better team across the board. And so, speaking for VA, I really do hope that VA is going to turn around. It doesn't happen overnight. You're turning the
No.
Titanic around,
Yes.
and I am cautiously optimistic that a lot of things are going to change. And even at DoD, I know folks who are in senior positions in DoD, and I'm actually even being considered for one of them. But I've got my
Oh
own
wow.
priorities here at home. Yeah, I can't get into too much, but haven't gotten a
Yeah.
formal offer yet. But I interviewed at the White House a couple months ago.
That's
But
great.
yeah,
Congratulations.
cool experience. Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I haven't got an offer yet, but or anything like that. But I'm just kind of waiting the wings. We'll see what happens. But I'm very optimistic for the future. My biggest complaint is that it's not happening fast enough. Just like with the deportations, you got to build up some steam. I mean,
Yeah,
we've
but
only
he
been
used the wrong act. He used an old wartime act that's only been used 3 times with a whole bunch of constitutional holes in it, when he should have used the same deportation act that Clinton and Obama used to
yeah,
deport 5 million, and that same act, which was ratified by Congress in
yeah,
'96, should also makes it where local law enforcement empowers them, and it takes away the immigrants' a lot of the Fourth Amendment issues, and they're processed out immediately without being able to sue the government.
yeah. And the thing is like right now, it's like there's so many folks on the other team that are basically just doing that, throwing up. That's why you have all these crazy lawsuits and injunctions and enjoinders. And the thing is, though, is like they're doing everything they can to slow it down. However, for what it's worth, is there's been an awful lot more like self deportations. And I think, for example, I think in what LA it was just a few days ago, they had that video. They did it for optics, right? Of like all the ICE folks jumping out of the rental truck and running folks down in like a Home Depot parking lot.
Uh-huh.
And I know for and what that did was is okay. Granted, they rounded up only a handful of folks, but they're doing that to send a message to like so that a lot of folks who are here illegally are like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's better to leave on my own terms than it is to wait till I have it foisted upon me. And I mean, that's one of the things as well. I mean, yeah, I think it's going to get better. Also, keep in mind, there's a lot of folks out there, myself included, who are very impatient. It's only been what 7, 8 months, and it's like into a 4-year term. We've got a lot of shit's gotten done. Like one that alone, just the fact that we've actually closed the border, like that's a huge in what 3 months. That's
I mean,
pretty
that was
damn.
the same executive orders that were in place before Biden took them all
It
out
was
of place.
just
So it was just a matter of putting executive orders in place. They were saying
yeah.
they couldn't shut it down. I knew they could shut it down. I
It's
mean,
a
that
matter
was
of will. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not a oh we can't or it's too hard. Simply a matter of political will. And like
yeah.
President Trump was right. It's like no, we didn't need a whole new law. We didn't need all this. We just need a new president. And I think he was absolutely right on that. I am
Well,
pretty
I mean, you
optimistic.
need a whole new law if it's going to last past his
Yeah, I
presidency.
agree.
Yeah.
That does need to happen, and I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see what we got to do is make sure that we maintain control of the House and the Senate. Right? I think that happens. That's really key. And once that happens, I think you're going to see much bigger changes come through.
I mean,
No?
I'm gonna break away. No, I mean that's
Okay.
what needs to happen.
Yeah.
But there's a lot the trends. I do a lot of social media, a
Yeah.
lot of social media.
Same.
I've my biggest post on Twitter X whatever was six
Yeah.
million views. So
Oh, that's good.
I do a lot of social media stuff, and I keep up with the trends and all that stuff. And
That's cool.
it's trending. It's trending in the other, even though it's not showing people that are supporting Democrats. It's trending away. I mean, there's a split MAGA. It's trending away from you know being attacked.
Yeah.
If you post anything, even if it's based on the Constitution against Trump, 4 months ago you would be attacked. Just
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
and
I
over and
mean,
over and over. Whereas now, you're not attacked anymore, and there's a lot of people that are going with it. And there's a lot of previous MAGA that have taken MAGA down and said, I'm not going to go with MAGA over this reason or that reason. Epstein, the Qatar jet, whatever reason you want to say. There's a lot of people that are moving away from that, and I feel like when this election. I mean, just to give you an example.
yeah.
Before I fell out with Mike Johnson,
Mhm.
I came up with a campaign strategy for Trump. Well,
Yeah.
my daughter she wants to be an MMA fighter. She's training for the UFC. She's 11 years old. She trains 5 days a week.
Wow.
And this was one of her first tournaments. This was in 2000. Well, not her first tournament, but this was one of her jiu-jitsu tournaments. And she was
Yeah.
competing in at the Bossier Civic Center. And Mike Johnson shows up. So I go up at the beginning of last year, before
Yeah.
April 12th, and I go up and introduce myself and tell them about my social media platform, which at the time it was not unbiased. It was a conservative,
Yeah.
leaning take media platform, and we still reported unbiased news, but we took it for more of a conservative view than an unbiased view,
Yeah.
and. And so I told him about what I had in mind for Trump, and he was like, "Well, I was just on the phone with Trump. He wants to come on to Fox with me on Sunday for
Hmm.
whatever show it was." He said, "That's genius." He said, "Listen, I'm going to give you my personal contact information. Please don't give it to anybody because people are lining up to meet him." He said, "I
Sure.
want you to send it to me with all the resources and everything attached to it, all the links that back up all your research." He said, "And I'm going to give it to Trump's campaign manager." Trump used it on one of the debates.
Oh
He
wow.
used
Okay.
the strategy on the debate. He didn't go quite as far with it as
Sure.
suggested, but he did use that same strategy. And so
Wow.
I was all for Trump winning. And I saw a whole 20-year path to conservatives having, power. And
Yeah.
I was all for everything up until Liberation Day. And then things started to get off the
Mm-mm.
trail a little bit for me. I know a lot of people would like to see these liberal cities taken over by and federalized. But if you flip that shoe around and you say, what would the Republicans have done if when Biden was in office, he sent the National Guard to states against the
Right.
Constitution and
Right.
federalized Republican-run cities? They would have been screaming about the Constitution.
Right.
But when the shoe's on the other foot, we're not. Oh, the Constitution's out the window. I mean, just a case in point. And I mentioned this the other day on an interview. I literally had people when I was being attacked for putting out true information that was backed
Mhm.
up and sourced. Well, I mean, I don't get I get stuff from the media and then I run it through and research it on several different AIs, web
Yeah.
crawlers, everything. And if it
Yeah.
lines up, then that's what I put out there.
Yeah.
And these people were literally saying, well, that's why we need to do away with the Constitution. It's getting in Trump's way. I mean, that's the foundation of our country. That's the
Right.
bedrock. And so, I know what you're saying,
Yeah.
and I really, really, but I mean, there's a lot of people that now these Republicans have gone on their spring or summer break or whatever it
Yeah.
is. They're getting literally booed out of town hall meetings saying we're going to vote you out, trying to sell the big beautiful bill.
Yeah. Okay, so like a lot there is here, but here's a couple of things that I've noticed. So this sounds strange, but just last week I finished up a fellowship with. Are you familiar with the Claremont Institute? You heard of them at all?
It sounds
They're
familiar. You
they're
just
pretty
go
much
ahead and
like
tell
the
us.
most. They're pretty much like the most right wing think tank that
Oh yeah,
operates in
they're kind of like
DC.
what's the ones that put out 20 25? What Project
Heritage.
25?
That was
Heritage, yes,
Heritage. Now, yeah,
yes.
Heritage they were really bad for a while. Since Kevin Roberts took over, they really done a lot of good work. So the
Okay.
Claremont Institute was actually where JD Vance got to start through them, and a lot of big names, both on the right, both some you might like and some you might not like, but very notable people go through there. It's like
Absolutely.
yeah, Ben Shapiro, Jack Posobiec, who else? Mark Levin back in the day. Say what you want about these guys, but they're very
Yeah.
prominent names. And so
Oh, absolutely.
super honor for me to be, in that. So I was in there with several White House staffers, with the lawyer. It was only 14 of us, and including the lawyer with the Oversight Project who's currently leading the Biden auto pen investigation. Yeah. Like all that stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah. He's running all that. Some pretty, like, what you say, heavy hitters. And one of the things that the topic of the fellowship is, we started with like the foundations of the Constitution, like where natural right, natural law, or natural right, natural rights, and natural law come in. Like we're talking Aristotle, and then
Yes.
even like the Old Testament, and then
Socrates
going
or whatever.
and then Locke and Hobbes, and then we got to the Constitution all the way up through Lincoln and like legally. So we had a bunch of legal folks on there. Like Michael Anton was teaching a class. John Yoo, of all people, was really interesting teaching class. He had some interesting things. Heather McDonald. I mean, great folks, big names. Matt Peterson, who runs the Blaze, he was running it. It was great. And so the thing is, though, is like the whole premise, or the whole topic was basically saying, here's where we started, and now here's where we are today. What the hell went wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what do we do to fix it? And the thing is, at the end, they kind of said, like, we don't really have an answer. That's why you're part of this, because there really is no, in order to like actually get us back to our true constitutional roots, right? That it takes an amount of change that I don't know if people have the stomach for. And also, people follow the Constitution when it's convenient, right?
That is exactly that's my whole point on my bias. Yes.
And then when it's not convenient, they'll find a workaround.
Absolutely. Oh,
And
absolutely.
so that's like a huge aspect of that I follow. And then also what's interesting is that if you really, and this is like being, I put on fundraisers, we've been donors, blah, blah, blah. I've been to Mar-a-Lago. It's beautiful.
Yes.
But the thing is, it's really nice, but one of the things I learned, and this is an ugly aspect of politics that deals on both sides, is you can have some of the best ideas in the world, but if you want to actually get their attention and get them to actually move on stuff.
Well, here's the problem, and that's
That
where the super PACs and the military-industrial complex and the big pharma and all that stuff come in, and they get them in their back pockets. This is my problem with the way politics is now, and I'll tell you what I see, at least, from somebody on the outside compiling information.
Sure.
The big problem with politics is somewhere it became not about the people but about the party. Because you're right, you can have a good idea left or right, But if the other is in charge and they don't want you looking good before election season, they're not going to vote it in, even if it's the best thing for the people
Yeah,
because of the party.
the most important thing to them is winning and maintaining power. That comes first. You have to, in order to be able to exert power, you have to win. And if you trying to exert power in the right way might stop you from winning in the next election, then you might not do it. But to even go further on the like, if you actually, this sounds crazy, and some of your listeners who, I imagine most of your listeners are normal everyday people. They work for a salary. There might be some entrepreneurs that have a few bucks, but if you actually want to get your congressman's attention, it's about $6,000. About 6,000.
You go to one of their plate meals
You go to
where
one
you
of their
pay
plate
for a
meals, you
plate.
make a
Yeah.
donation. I mean, I'll tell you what, man. Like I've done that where I made a donation. I say, and then when I'm in DC, hey, I'm in town. Like, oh yeah, come on over to the office. I got my feet up on the guy's coffee table. you know, no,
Well,
when I said literally, I had my feet on his coffee table.
wow. You know,
and like that's part of the game. And one other thing, if I may, and this is like the other way to get people's attention. I learned this. A friend of mine who runs another news podcast called Breaking Points. His name is Sagar and Jetty. He's been on
mhm.
Rogan a bunch. He's been on a bunch of podcasts. Great dude. Is one thing he told me in private, but then he said it later on his show. And I heard this and I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I don't like it, but you're right. You can get a lot of attention on social media. You've got a bunch of followers on social media. I've got some followers on social media. And you might get a lot of buzz, right? And get a lot of attention. But here are the things if you actually want to get a congressman or a senator's attention or the White House's attention and to actually have them like read it and maybe take it to heart, it has to appear in a handful of places. And this is for both sides: New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, Fox. To a lesser extent, maybe USA Today, maybe MSNBC. But if you're not appearing in these large mainstream, even today, because, and this is the way he explained it to me, because I'm like, yeah, but way more people follow what's going on in social media than what they're talking about on CNN or Fox, like a ton more. And he's like, no, that doesn't what matters. You have to remember that those organizations, CNN, Fox, WAPO, New York Times, and to a lesser extent maybe LA Times, etc., those are trade publications. Those are the
Yeah.
trade publication of Washington. So, like for example, if you want to change the way that like you have an HVAC business or something, or you've got to like, hey, go write something in like HVAC trade publication. Those outlets, when they're talking, yes, they're talking to the nation. They're really talking to DC. That's who they're actually talking to, and those are the people that actually listen and pay attention. And he said that to me, my head exploded because I'm like, how the hell did I not realize this? But also, it's like because I'm like, that's really ugly. I don't like that. But he's right. And so the big things I noticed to actually have influence are gross things. You have to go still today through the mainstream media because that is what the trade of politics, that's their trade publications. Go through those mainstream media outlets as much as I despise them. You got to. And if not that, be get out your freaking checkbook.
Yeah.
And like that's actually have influence. And I don't see that written anywhere in the Constitution. By the
Well,
way,
it's not what you know, it's who you know, right?
it
But
matters. It just
but
does.
I was going to go just a little bit more in depth
Sure.
on where I see the politicians breaking. At first, it's become about the party and not the people.
Yeah.
That happened first.
Yeah.
Then you remember we used to have Democrats or Republicans, but I'm going to give a Democrat example because I've got one in mind
Yeah.
that literally just retired and was so disgusted with his party he changed to an independent. Joe
Okay.
Manchin. Joe
Ah,
Manchin, I think
yes.
of West Virginia.
Yep.
He was literally like right there on the line. He was a Democrat, but he was a conservative Democrat. I mean, he was right
Yeah.
there. He was a
Last of the
centrist.
Blue Dogs. Last of the Blue
Yes.
Dog Democrats. Yeah.
Yes. And we've got the same thing. So we got these extreme AOCs and Nancy Pelosi's, whatever. And then we've got, the left, and then we've got the right. And they're so far away from each other because to be able to have a debate of merit, you have to at least have some commonality. And
Right.
so they're so far they have no commonality, so they can't debate anything, and nobody can cross the aisle for anything.
Correct. I totally agree. And also the on top of that, what is also very frustrating I have with the Republicans, it also sounds weird. I don't even like to use the word conservative. I
Yeah,
don't. I like this word as the right. And I only
yeah,
say that because conservatism is really just progressivism driving the speed limit. The most conservative people today are trying to conserve the values that Democrats had in the 80s and 90s, right? I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, for the most part, I mean, with some exceptions here and there, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, especially on the social issues, but even on the tax and foreign policy issues, but especially on the social issues, is whatever Democrats believed in like the mid 80s to mid 90s are really where the Republican Party is today. So, on top of that, though, is you always know because the Democrats are very good at being very united. They're a united front, right? Because I think it maybe just comes down to like collectivism, right? Where it's like, hey, this is the party line, you're going to follow it. Whereas we
Maybe
always have to,
tribalism.
yeah, tribal. But also, the thing is, we always have to worry about the Republicans because the thing is, when it's some bill where it's like, hey, it's close, we don't have a huge margin in the House, and we always have to worry. And for good or bad, for good or for bad, right? We always have to worry about who is it on the right that's going to be like, oh, I need to be an independent on this. I don't really agree. And or even on Supreme Courts, right? We've got a what 5-4 right now of Republican appointees. We always know how the left is going to rule. We're not sure about the right, and that's one, and maybe that's because honestly, being on the right usually involves more reason, logic, independent thinking, right, and
Well,
voting your
actually,
conscience.
if you're on the right, that's why I said the right will never be able to play the law fair that the left did,
No, not to the
because
same extent. No.
well, they just can't do it because
Yeah.
the right judges hold the Constitution. That's
Right.
what they hold. That's what they put up there. The left
Yeah.
judges will bend the Constitution, maybe even break it.
Oh yeah.
And so if you take it to a right judge and it's BS and it's lawfare, he's going to kick it out. If you take it to a left judge and it's about a left-leaning thing, they're going to kick it out. So there's
Right.
no way to get it the way that they did. But
Yeah.
that's what's
Yeah. Well,
go
but
ahead.
here's the thing: is like say is the other little phrase, and these sound like little cliches, but I think they're good because they're easy to remember and they're very true. Is that the party, or the side that wants to play by the rules will always lose to the side that wants to win.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. But that's what's so dangerous. And I'll
Yeah.
be reporting it this Saturday,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially about the federalizing of law enforcement and
Yeah.
breaking autonomy. That's
Yeah.
what's so dangerous is it's not what you're doing, it's what you're setting a precedence for.
Yeah.
And then the next party that gets in will push it that much further. And then before you know it, we don't have a constitution.
Yeah, and well, then also I think the concern was always like, well, wouldn't this set a bad precedent? This would be you'd set a bad precedent. But the issue, though, I'd say my counter to that is the left does unprecedented things all the time. They tried to throw the leading candidate into jail within like 4 different jurisdictions, and it's like, oh, this is retribution payback. It's like you tried to get him killed,
But the
and you tried to throw him
problem
in jail for his
is
whole life. Yeah,
Yeah, but the problem is that Trump on a Fox interview, I think it was with Hannity, he
yeah,
said, what is your retribution or retaliation going to be? And he said, success will be my retribution. I'll be a dictator for one day, drill, drill,
yeah.
drill, and then success. And so this attack on law firms that's unprecedented, this
Mm-hmm.
$940 million like buy of pro bono work to switch them and so they
Mm-hmm.
don't go against the administration. All this stuff
Yeah,
is like, two wrongs don't make a right. All right, so you're going to stoop to their level and go even further on a constitutional level for people who just before it was elected, hey, you're infringing on the First Amendment, free speech. You're trying to censor us. So you're not doing that, but you're doing something else, which it gives them an open door. I mean, look at what Biden did when Greg Abbott said we're closing our border. He was going to have federal agents go down there and be lined up against state National Guard or try to
yeah,
federalize, but the agency bucked and he said, you know what, I'm not going to do it. So there's got to be a point where, I mean, let's just for a second go back to the Epstein. I think a
yeah,
lot of people really got mad because a lot of times Trump, when he grabs something, it's like a bulldog grabbing a bone. He locks his
yeah.
jaw and he's not gonna get off of it, or not, at least not very easily.
Right.
And when he came out and said Epstein's a hoax, you're basically saying
Yeah.
to
Trump.
all those people who were sexually assaulted, all those minors,
Yeah.
that they don't exist because because it's all a hoax. So
Yeah.
you're disrespecting every victim of Jeffrey Epstein and all the people that came to his island. you
I was
know,
I was really disappointed. Like, also, I'll be honest with you, when that one happened, I was like, ooh, that was
yeah.
disappointing. Yeah, I was disappointed. I mean, no, 100%. When that happened, I was pretty disappointed. No, yeah, I don't know what what the the 4D chess going on, if whatnot, it is there, if any. I don't know, but no. But the thing is, I was like, at the same time, I'm just like, hey, look, this is yes, there are problems. No, it is not perfect. However, it's just imagine if we hadn't won and Kamala Harris was
Oh,
in.
I mean, I still as disgusted. And I mean, and like week before last, he
Yeah,
did something, and I have a merch shop that I
yeah,
started a few weeks ago, a Patriot Party
cool,
merch shop, and so we put out a new line every Friday for something that's we have a lot of constitutional stuff and all that
cool.
stuff, but base stuff, apparel. But we put out a new line every Friday. So a couple weeks ago and I even posted about it and everything. He did something where he delivered on a campaign promise, even though it was only with one nation. The
Yeah,
EU has to pay a tariff to our government to import stuff in certain
yeah,
stuff. And so I did a whole thing that Trump delivers. EU pays
yeah,
15% tariff. Um, you know, but this week with the constitutional stuff, I'm going to do
yeah.
one that said with Trump, making a finger say, "Did you vote for this?" Because I'm as unbiased as possible when I'm trying to make the shop where it's when
Sure.
I put out apparel or a line, and all of it matches. It's a hat in several
Yeah,
different colors. It's a coffee mug. It's
cool.
a short sleeve T-shirt in all sorts of colors and sizes, from small to 5X. It's a long sleeve knit shirt and a hoodie, and all of it matches. It's an apparel line across the board,
That's
and I
cool.
do that every Friday.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's on the links on the on any of the new podcast for the last
Right on,
couple
man.
weeks.
I'll have to check that out for sure. 100%,
Cool,
dude.
cool. Yeah, appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
But absolutely, I try to come at it from constitutional law. That's what I'm looking at. What does
Yeah.
this violate? What case law? What constitutional law? What does this violate? What are you using? The Wartime Act. Well, if you really wanted to deport him, why didn't you use this act?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking at it from a legal standpoint and
Sure.
breaking that down. It's not
Sure.
really what I think. It's what does this violate?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it probably is violating something. I mean, I'm not gonna. I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, man. I mean, I look. Like I said, there are still a lot of issues that, and again, we're only what 6, 7, 8 months, 7, 8 months in, and it's
Yeah.
like, all right, a lot of good things have happened. A lot of things that I'm not so happy about have happened, but on balance, I'm pretty satisfied. There are a
Oh,
few
I mean, we
things that
couldn't
like,
have we couldn't have voted for Kamala Harris. That's a non-starter.
yeah,
That
yeah,
couldn't have happened. That couldn't
yeah,
have
yeah,
happened.
absolutely,
But
and so.
I was a big fan of Vivek Ramaswamy's. I watched a lot of his stuff.
Uh-huh.
I watched him give his valedictorian speech. He was super smart. I don't know if
Yeah.
you know who Candace Owens is, but she
Oh yeah, I
traveled
know.
around with him. And
I met her husband once. I've never met. No, I haven't met Candace, but I met her husband once.
I
And
like
yeah,
Candace.
a lot. Yeah, no, no, a lot of. Oh, and it gets spicy. And I don't even know if I agree with her on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it's it is entertaining to watch, and it also like, oh, maybe there's something there. Like especially the whole Brigitte thing.
Well, I'm not even talking about her
No, no.
show. I've watched her debate on Dr. Phil,
Oh yeah,
Harvard PhDs
yeah,
about college and all that stuff, and make them look silly. She is
yeah.
super sharp. I actually thought she should be the press secretary because she
Fuck.
would. I said she would. I mean, she would eviscerate the press, and then they couldn't use their favorite card, the race card. They couldn't use that
Yeah.
on her.
Oh yeah. I know she's bright. You know what's crazy? She's doing that. Well, I think she just had her fourth kid.
Yeah,
All that stuff, like
I
all the
think
time
so.
while she having kids all the time, that's wild. No, I mean she's very impressive, very sharp
But
gal.
anyway, she had traveled around with Vivek, and she said, well, one, he's doing twice the town halls of any other candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Two, he is operating on a plane far above anybody. I mean, he's literally like genius, like in a different sense, but kind of like Elon Musk. I mean, he's on a whole different
Yeah,
level,
yeah,
but he's very personable. A lot of times, geniuses they lose their ability to be personable and have that street smarts, but he
yeah,
does. He's a
yeah, yeah,
rare breed of that. And what really got me was Trump, when Trump was having all that election stuff and those people were
yeah,
trying to take him off the ballot, not only did he stand up and say all the other candidates should do this and follow my lead, any state that takes him off the ballot, I'm pulling out of. And then he also, doing twice the town halls, he's a Yale law graduate. He
Yeah.
wrote an amicus brief for Trump to go to the Supreme Court,
Cool. Wow, that's good. No,
as
I
his
mean,
opponent.
yeah, I mean, I look forward to him being the governor of Ohio.
Absolutely.
You know, yeah,
Absolutely.
and he'll most likely get it.
Yes.
And I think that's going to be very good for Ohio. I mean, 100%.
Yes.
And I think he's got a bright future ahead of him for sure. I mean, he's younger than I am. It's wild.
Oh,
You know?
he's 35 or 30. He's younger than me.
Yeah. And
He's
wow. And so,
35 or 36.
and one thing I'll also say, and I don't know how you feel about this one, but I still believe, and maybe there's also because, like, I knew the guy before he's a senator, not super well. We know each other now, but I still think the best decision, in my opinion, that Donald Trump has ever made has been JD Vance. And I know you might not agree, but let me hear me out.
No, 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 no.
Is
I agree. I actually called it a month before he chose him. I called it to
nice.
my father-in-law. I called it because I did it strictly on. I put it on a video back then. I did it strictly on who would bring more votes, and it
Yeah.
came down to the governor of North Dakota, or whoever that guy
Yeah.
was. But see,
Yeah. Burgum.
everybody else was just had MAGA supporters. But who was going to bring the votes and who was going to bring the party together? And
Mm-hmm.
the guy from North Dakota, he had the traditionalist Republicans, and JD Vance had the populist Republicans. And there was more populist Republicans in the party than there were traditionalists. So I
Yeah.
put the pieces together and I said he's going to pick JD Vance. Now, when he picked him, and when JD Vance did his debates, I
Yeah.
mean, flawless, flawless.
Smoked
He's
him.
so good.
Yeah.
I said that's who should be president. Really, when I heard him
And
debate.
I think he will be. And I'll be honest, I think he will be the next president. In my opinion, I think he'll definitely be the nominee. I think the president. But the thing is what I say is I knew a lot of guys, especially veterans, and not just because JD was a veteran, but I knew a lot of guys who were not thrilled about Trump. Right? Just they were always, these guys who voted for Obama, they
Yeah.
feel a lot of the same way. They might have been skeptical of Trump or had their issues, but they are excited about JD Vance. Like that for a lot of folks who might have even just at least that I know personally, like normies who don't pay attention to who aren't like political news junkies like you and I,
Um.
is the thing is that a lot of folks who might have stayed home or were not sure, they were excited to vote for JD. And so especially the younger vote, the millennial crowd, the Gen X crowd are incredibly excited about him. And he's got so much of the good stuff on the policy level about Trump
Yes.
even further, but also he's got the right proper amount of refinement. He's got the background as well. I mean, he didn't have the best upbringing. He has a background that a lot of people can identify with. Yeah, I'm very excited about JD.
Plus, he's got minority, with his wife. But the thing is, yeah, I think he's done much better. At the beginning, I questioned it. I said,
Yeah,
is he really for Trump? Because he released some very questionable statements, like
yeah,
the
he
one
was
about
critic.
the one. I know you're Catholic, whatever, but abortion's a buzz topic. And when he released a statement that says, I don't care if you were raped or it's incest, you still should have the baby. And I'm like, Trump's weakness is suburban women. You are turning off the suburban women. Why would you do that?
Yeah,
But then he came around, and after he won, I do believe that. And when I watched the debate, I said, man, he's
yeah,
he's more presidential than daggum Trump.
he's great.
Oh,
He's
well, I
fantastic.
said either one of them were more presidential than the daggum candidates.
He is fantastic. It's great. So yeah, 100%, man. I'm very excited about JD.
Cool, cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I just hope, I know that a lot of people have, and it's because, with social media and advertising has conditioned us to have literally a 30-second attention span.
right.
But and I know that you can't really say now what's going to happen in 3 years because a lot of things
Right.
can change.
True.
I thought Biden lost the election when there was that disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal where people were falling off planes on live news television. I'm like, oh, he's done, he's done. But nobody even remembered it when it
No.
came
Oh,
time for
very
the
short attention
election.
span. Oh yeah. Like a very short attention span.
Yes.
So
So,
yeah,
we'll see. And I hope things do pan out because I think that will definitely. My thing is one thing about Republicans, and this is why I like some of the traditional Republican values, is that it was always about a smaller government, a less invasive government, and let's go by the Constitution. And I just feel like we've gotten away from that.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, no doubt. No doubt we have. And I don't really know. And the thing is, it was like, that's like I said, when I went through that fellowship at Claremont, is these are some of the like the brightest minds on the right and constitutional originalism that you'll ever meet. And like, really, like, it came down to like at the end, we're like, we don't know.
Scratch your head. I don't know. Yeah, I
Well,
mean, it's
well,
like
the thing is a lot of people have ideas, but a lot of them are, like
a
if
lot of them
things
have to
get
go. Go
well,
ahead.
if things get so bad, I mean, there's a lot of people who said this, like, hey, we're not calling for this, but if things were really get bad, if Kamala had won and then things get worse and worse and worse, I mean, then there's like,
I know what you're saying. You don't have to
yeah,
say the words. I know what you're
yeah,
saying, and that that is a very real issue. It could
which
go
has its
either.
roots, and it has its roots with John Locke, Tom Hobbes, Thomas Jefferson. I mean, the founding fathers even kind of spell it out in the Declaration.
Well, I mean,
Where it's
that's
like,
the Second Amendment, but the problem, you know, the 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 problem is that the way I see it is any change has to go through the legislative process. It's got to go
yeah,
through the legislative branch. Well, a lot of these changes that would need to take place would affect them or their job
yeah,
security or the length they could have a job or the
oh
length they
yeah,
could have power, and power is the ultimate drug. So
yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah,
never going to vote. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
um
yeah, yeah, 100%. No, they're not.
um Listen, I want to come back
I
to
love to be back.
huh.
I'd love to be back. Yeah, if you have it. Yeah, yeah,
No,
let's
I
do it
want to
again.
come. I want to come back to your MacArthur group. I want to
Oh yeah,
hit
sure,
on that just a little bit more. Um,
sure. Yeah.
I want you to just to tell us about it a little bit. This interview has kind of flowed off my
No, no, it's
what I
okay.
had
No, it's great, and
what I
also
had gotten.
it's great, and it's fun stuff too. I mean, I love geeking out on stuff like this. This is actually really fun. Yeah,
Oh, I've really enjoyed this. So just
yeah,
to kind of keep us, kind of let us know the mission
sure,
statements, the what we can do as citizens, who we need to recommend this to.
sure.
Just kind of lay out what we need to know as an audience with the MacArthur Group.
Absolutely. So, like I said, we are a community care provider for very intensive mental health and addiction treatment for exclusively for America's veterans. And one of the things that like is really the best thing as far as like the call to action, because our mission is pretty simple, is to to save America's veterans from America's disastrous mental health and addiction crisis, creating a better future for themselves and their families. Right, pretty straightforward. And what we also really that the emphasis needs to be on the access to care within the VA. So there's something that like you or your audience can do is that actually, I'm having spent time in DC, I know this. They actually, when people call in to the congressional offices in DC, like, and they might have some 23-year-old intern or junior staffer picking up the phone, and somebody's yakking, like, okay, and they're on there like, oh, yes, ma'am, okay, well, but they actually do keep a tally of those. They really do. They keep a tally when people call, like people calling about this, people are calling about that. And what does matter is just making sure that veterans have immediate access to intensive inpatient mental health and addiction treatment, because the vast majority of the most vulnerable ones and the ones that we treat are not the guys and gals. And when I say guys and gals, it's mostly guys, though. Let's just be honest,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
These are not the guys who say, I'm sad sometimes, I'm kind of depressed, I think I might drink too much, and I'm arguing with my wife a lot. Those aren't the folks we're dealing with. Like that, those are something that like outpatient counseling that can help, right? But the ones we're dealing with are the ones who are near death, right? They're looking at incarceration, going back into incarceration, or just dying. They're at rock bottom. Mostly have lost their jobs, they've lost their families, and they've got nothing left. And we are almost like, from a mental health standpoint, we're like the trauma center. We put
Okay.
them back together and help them get back, and then it trenches them out. Those are the folks that are the most vulnerable. So that's why it's really important to have immediate access to inpatient, right? Like immediate, mental health and addiction treatment. It's like saying like, we're like the ER, the trauma center, and we don't need to be worrying about, the urgent care. Those have their place and they're important. Don't get me wrong, but we're here in the life saving business right now. That is what we're here for. And that is the part of addiction treatment, mental health within the VA, within community care, that needs the most attention right now. So that's my big call. Call your congressman, call your senator, let them know that. And there currently is, it's called the Access Act. which is in Congress right now, and that would solidify and codify decisions that are being made within the VA that are not happening fast enough at the executive level. But this codifies it, puts it into law. So it's support for the Access Act. Call your congressman, call the senator to make sure that a veteran has immediate access to inpatient mental health and addiction treatment. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Well, Tom, I know you have a prior engagement, but I would ask you, I'm going to wrap this
Yeah,
up real quick. I just
please.
asked you to stay in the studio for a few minutes because I just have
You got it.
a few things I want to kind of shoot to you. So if you just hang around for just a minute, I'm going to wrap this up real quick. And we want to thank you so much for joining the Patriot Party. And to all you out there, stay safe. Don't forget to catch our Saturday morning show at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, where truth meets every corner of the news.